Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem, Shem Irgin Shir Torah. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Harav Yaakov Zav Smith Shlita and Krias Shema Kelchosa. Krias Shema, doing it right. To have the great Zchus sponsoring a shir called Irgin Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com.
I met someone who must have been close to 60 and he says, "You wouldn't believe it, I'm back to school again." I said, "You're right, I don't believe it. What happened?" So he says his company sent him back to a what's called a refresher course. For like a week or so, he was going to school every day, learning new skills about the job that he does. And he explained to me something very logical. You know, if a person works for months on end, and he's not efficient, he's not doing good, he's not working in the best way possible, so a lot of the time is being wasted. If you go back to school and you learn a refresher course, you learn new things, new skills about the old job, but you learn different ways of doing things, the better ways, then the work that you do for many more years is much more productive. And it's worth it for the company to send him, pay for his schooling for a week or so, and he doesn't work, so they get paying for that also, just to go and sharpen your skills, so whatever he does in the future is certainly much more valuable. I was thinking that's a beautiful lesson for an Erlich Yid. You know, Yiddishkeit also needs occasionally a refresher course to make sure we're doing things right, and maybe we could do it a little better. And certainly, I was thinking the mitzvah of Krishma, we do it twice or 3 times a day. Krishma is one of the central mitzvahs of Yiddishkeit. It's Amunah, it's Kabbalah Malchus Shemayim, it's Yeciאת Mitzrayim, oil mitzvahs. I wanted to just basically go through the mitzvah. Hopefully, we'll pick up some new yediyas, some new ways of appreciating the mitzvah. It's Takov noteworthy. The pasuk says in parsha Shoftim, Takov, pasuk Gimel, Yid went to war and they were very scared they might lose their lives at war. So the pasuk says that the Kohen said, Shema Yisrael atam kreim hayom la'milchama. So the Gemara in Sotah Daf Mem Beis points out their mom is scared for their lives, they need schusim, and the Kohen said, Shema Yisrael. So the Gemara darshins the schus of Shema Yisrael. Just if you say Krishma properly, that alone will save you from danger. Because Torah is Megan Umatzil, and as the Torah Tamima points out, Krishma is the mitzvah Krishma plus the limud HaTorah of every bit of Krishma. So you see that just the mitzvah of Krishma has enough to save a Yid from terrible danger. The Peleyoyitz in Erech Krishma points out, he says there's so much to the mitzvah of Krishma. Chaval the mishtachchen, that people that lived their lives, and this is what he says, and they were never yoy to the mitzvah of Krishma because they never learned to do it properly. So we'll try to push it just to focus a little bit on the mitzvah itself and how every Krishma counts, every word of Krishma counts. It's taka noteworthy. The Mishnah Chagiga Daf Tes says there are certain things that a person does irreparable damage. If someone, Rahman al-Tzlan, is mizana and he has a child, a mamza, that's something that you can't turn back the clock. Or the Mishnah says that Hamachacham HaPayrish Min HaTorah, Hamachacham goes off the derech, a terrible, terrible churban. Comes again the Gemara, Daf Testament Beis. Another example of Movish Lo Yuchal Liskain is he was Mavatel Krishma. He missed Krishma once. That is as bad as Chas V'Shalom HaMamza or Tamacham goes off the derech. So obviously every Krishma that we say, even though we're zeicher to say it many, many times, but every Krishma counts. They say that Rabbi once said that the story is told there, B'Sol Salanta once missed the first man Krishma and he fainted. So Baron says, "Nishtamis." So the person says, "Why is it not emes that he fainted?" He goes, No, it's not emes that he ever missed the first man Krishma. Not shaykh, because that's the Movish Lo Yuchal Liska, and it couldn't be if B'Sol Salanta, the Baron protected him. No, Lamaisa, we see again the mitzvah of Krishma, and every time we say it has to count. Let's learn a little bit again about the mitzvah and hopefully touch upon the main yotzei. The source of the mitzvah of Krishma is the pasuk in V'yaschanan, as the Gemara in Brachos Chaval of Darshans, V'dibarta bam, B'shiftcha b'veisecha, and B'shachvecha uvkumecha. And based on this, and I found Takov 6 places in Bavli Yerushalmi that learns various halachos of Krishma from this pasuk V'dibarta bam. Lamashal, the second parak in Shalmi and Brachos, you're allowed to answer during Krishma b'tnei hakavod from this pasuk V'dibarta bam. The Shalmi in the 7th parak in Saita, you're allowed to say Krishma in any lashon based on this pasuk. Brachas Yud Aleph, the halachos of Isaac b'mitzvah are learned from this pasuk, going on Krishma. Brachas Daf Yud, you're allowed to say Krishma anyway, whether you're sitting or standing, as we'll soon see. Brachas Daf Beis, Daf Yud is the halachos of Zman Krishma, all from this pasuk V'dibarta bam. But what's most negeya, the 6th Gemara, and that's the Gemara in Chaf Aleph, where the Gemara makes the following statement. A person has a suffix if he said Krishma, he has to repeat the Krishma. Suffix if he davened, or a suffix if he said Birchas Krishma, he doesn't repeat. For the Gemara, what's the cheshbon? Says Gemara very pashut. Krishma is the raisa, so even a suffix you have to repeat because fake the raisa l'chumra. But Birchas Krishma, tefillah, is the rabbanan. So a suffix you could be mekel, and that's why the most moini ha-mitzvahs, the Rambam and Seif ha-mitzvahs, the Chinuch and Tavchaf, the Smag, Yud Ches, the Rosh, in Paragimel, Siman Tezvav, and others say that Krishma is the mitzvah deraisa that we have every single day, twice a day. Okay, there are Taisas Shita in Sukkah Menachah seems to be that Krishma is the Rabbanan, but it's noteworthy that the Mechaba devotes an entire Siman. Siman Samach Zayin has one Sif, and the Sif is all about Safek Krishma. And Mechaba says Safek Krishma, you have to repeat the Krishma. Zok the Mishtabura, because Krishma is the Raisa, and even the Ksiv Dibarta Bam, and therefore Safek Krishma is Safek the Raisa. What really impacts the halachos of Krishma is the starting point that Krishma is the Raisa. Now, to look at the Krishma, if you think about it, there are 6 parts of the Krishma. Kel Melech Naaman, which is an original, it's not a pasuk. Shema Yisrael is in V'yaschanan. Baruch Shem, as we'll soon see, is original. It's based on Midrashim. V'yahavta is in V'yaschanan. V'hayim Shemaya is in Ekev. And the last parsha is actually first in the Torah. V'yomer is in parsha Shlach. What's Pshat? Why this package, and why don't we say it in order? L'char Shlach is before V'yaschanan. So this is a Mishnah in Brachos, Daf Yud Gimel, which is probably the most important yotzei for today. Frag the Mishnah, Lama Kod Parsha Shema L'v'hayim Shemaya. What's the order? Zok the Mishnah, the first thing is Kaddish Yikabel Olav Oil Malchus Shemayim Tchila. Step 1 is a person has to Yikabel Oil Malchus Shemayim, and that's the parsha, the pasuk of Shema. Then you could start with V'hayim Shemaya. A person that's not an Eved Hashem, so mitzvahs have no meaning to him. First you have to be Makabel al Malchus Shemayim. Then you start with mitzvahs. Now, why is V'hayim Shemayim before V'hayim? If V'hayim is really first, it's in Parsha Shlach, Zok the Mishnah, because the mitzvahs basically are by day and night, but V'hayim, which of course primarily is Krishma, tzitzis is only by Yoim. Now you noticed we have an order, Kabbalah Malchus Shemayim, mitzvahs, and then tzitzis. Now what's missing obviously is Kel Melech Naaman and Baruch Shem, that hopefully we'll see as we proceed. But there's no doubt about it that we have 6 parts of Krishma, and Krishma, the starting point is the Raisa. The big question is, which of the 6 parts of Krishma are the Raisa? So the emes is in Svara, although every single word is important, we'll soon see, literally every word is important, but it's logical to say that the Ikki is Kabbalah or Malchus Shemayim. So that would mean Shema Yisrael, L'char Zicha is the Raisa. And that seems to be a Gemara in Brachos. Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, where the Gemara says, Shema Yisrael, Zu Krias Shema Shel Yehuda Nasi, and the Gemara tells a story. Lo Chazina Rabbi, they didn't see Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the Makabel of Al-Machlu Shemayim. In other words, he was learning a whole day, and they don't know when he said Krias Shema. So they said, B'shah Shema v'yadav al ponav. It's interesting, your lashon yadav sounds like you're supposed to use both hands to cover your eyes. We'll soon get back to that. But they said, when he said Krias Shema, when he covered his eyes, he said Krias Shema. So agav, you see from the Gemara, the minhag Israel to cover your eyes, and it says yadav. We'll soon get back to that. But the assumption is that he said Krias Shema and they didn't even notice it. So this leads many Rishonim to say that what's the deraisa of Krias Shema? Only Shema Yisrael. The Meiri and Brachis, the Rashba and Tshuva and Aleph Shin Chaf, the Chinuch and Tav Chaf, and the Beis Yosef, the end of Samach Gimel sums it up that it's from the Sugya, it's mashma, that only Pasuk Rishon is the rice. And I want to make it clear. In Gemara terms, parsha Rishon is Shema and V'yahavta. And the second one, of course, is V'haya. But Pasuk Rishon has one meaning, and that's Shema. And the Beis Yosef is saying that the Raisa is only Pasuk Rishon. And the truth is, when a person learns Mishnah Berurah, Shulchan Aruch, he comes to the halacha that he finds it very surprising. In the end of Siman Mem Vav, which is halachos of karbanos, it says that when a person says karbanos, so we know part of the karbanos is the pasuk Shema Yisrael. So the Ramah recommends when you say Shema Yisrael, also say Baruch Shem. Why? Because you might get very fatvekit chveisa along Pesukah de Zimmer, along Berachas Krias Shema, and you'll end up missing Zman Krias Shema. Chas v'shalom. So the eitzah is, if you say Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, so you have a Krias Shema that you yotzei b'shas atchak. As I state in the Rambam. In other words, don't say Shema Yisrael only, put in Baruch Shem. Now, the assumption is that you could be yotzei with Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem. Why? Because that's the emes. Because l'halacha midaraisa, the ikka is Shema Yisrael. Okay, the big Kaddish is Baruch Shem, is the Raisa, and we'll soon see that's a true diak. But we definitely see l'halacha, Baruch Shema Yisrael is the Raisa. Okay, L'maiser Rabbeinu Yoina in Daf Tes and Daf Arif says that Rabbeinu HaKadish's Krias Shema was not just Shema Yisrael, it was also V'yahavta. So parsha Rishon. Okay, no. Some shittas hold even V'hayim Shemoy is the Raisa. It seems from the Rambam even V'hayoim is the Raisa. Fine. The Shagasari in Siman Aleph and Siman Beis has a beautiful arichas ayin sham. But as we said, the Beis Yosef, the end of Siman Samach Gimel, the Ramah in Siman Mem Vav. So we have what to feel comfortable to say. The Mechaba and the Ramah seem to be convinced that Krias Shema deraisa is Shema Yisrael. Now, of course, we have to realize every word of Krias Shema is important, and the emes of the Mechaba basically alluded to that, because you learn the beginning of Siman Samach Aleph. The Mechaba says Yikra Krias Shema bekavana be'ema ve'yira be'reses be'ziyah. Very interesting. Mechaba says such a tall order. Krias Shema has to be kavana, ema, yira, reses be'ziyah. And the Goyin Kedarkai, always with a few words, but there's so much to it. The Goyin is bothered by the question. Yikra Krias Shema bekavana. We'll soon see that the Raisa and the mitzvah of Chiyav Kavana is only Shema Yisrael. So why does the Mechaba say the whole Krias Shema has to be kavana, ema, yira, reses be'ziyah? Zok the Ramah, Zok the Goyin, yes. Because l'chatchila, every word of Krias Shema counts, the Raisa, the Rabbanan, and every word has to be bekavana, be'ema, v'yira, reses be'ziyah. No, b'di'eved, yotzei, only Shema. But l'chatchila, the way to do it is, every word should count. So let's be clear. The Krias Shema deraisa is Shema Yisrael. We'll soon see Baruch Shem also. But ma'akiv, the Raisa is only Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, but every word counts. Now, Lamaisa, now that we see it's a deraisa, we have to start applying a very important klal. The Mechaba in Siman Samach Siv Dalid, speaking about mitzvahs in general, the Mechaba says that we paskin mitzvahs tzrichas kavana, which means a person does a mitzvah, he shakes lulav without kavana, he's not yotzei the mitzvah, he has to repeat it. It's like shaking a broomstick and a lemon. Kavana is an integral part of the mitzvah as the mitzvah itself. Now, Lamaisa, since Krishma's deraisa, a person has to have kavana to be yotzei the mitzvah. So whenever we say Krishma, morning and night, besides just saying the words properly, we have to have a mind to be yotzei the mitzvah of Krishma. So Lamaisa, the Chayadam, has his famous yotzei, the Kaddish, in Siman Klal Samaches, Sif Tes, and he says, basically, of course you have to have kavana for mitzvahs. But why is a person shaking Lula Punkt on Tes Vav Tishrei? And why is he sitting the Sukkah Punkt today? And why is he eating matzah Punkt Tes Vav Nisan? So when a person doing a mitzvah, it's obvious why he's doing it. So not the Pshat, the Chayadam holds you don't need kavana. But talk to Chayadam, if you're doing it, it's probably, there is a kavana, hopefully consciously or at least subconsciously, but the kavana is there. Now, one of his mishalim he gives is the mitzvah of Krishma. Because if you say Krishma and you know there's a mitzvah, you're probably saying it for the mitzvah. But I'm always concerned, a person that doesn't know there's such a mitzvah. To him it's part of davening. So hopefully we know that much, that we know that Krishma is not just part of davening, which is as important as anything else, but it's a mitzvah deraisa of Krias Shema. So when a person says it in davening, lachatchila, as in all the Siddurim, he should be mechavan l'shem mitzvah, hopefully, but even if he didn't, he knows such a mitzvah, so stam amira would include kavana. But the mechaber then has another sif, siman samach sif hey. HaKrias Shema v'lo kivan libay b'pasuk rishon shehu Shema Yisrael. If you don't have kavana for Shema Yisrael, lo yotzei de chayvasei. You just said that in Sif Dal, you have to have kavana. What's Sif Hey talking about? But more so, the Shulchan Aruch then continues that even if you hold, and that's the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Samach Dalet Sif Samach Gimel Sif Dalet, the Mechaber says the Ikar Kavana is pasuk Rishon. If you don't have kavana pasuk Rishon, you're not yotzei. Va'afilu man da'am mitzvah is ein tzrichas kavana moed hacha. So now we have two halachos, mitzvah kavana, and this second halacha pasuk Rishon. Now, what's pshat, and what's taka the cheshbon? If you hold ein tzrichas kavana and you shake lulav without kavana, you're yotzei. So if I said the first pasuk without kavana, why am I not yotzei? The Teres, the Mechaber, is telling us an extremely important halacha l'maisa. A person that does not shake lulav is not yotzei. I ain't tzrichas kavana. Teres, what do you mean? You have to do a maisa mitzvah. Then, if without kavana, you're yotzei. But you can't be yotzei without a maisa mitzvah. So the Mechaber is saying that kavana is not just a plus in the first pasuk. Kavana is the maisa mitzvah, because the Krishma is not lip service; it is kabbalas or malchus shamayim. If a person doesn't know what he's saying, if there's no actual kabbalas or malchus shamayim, then there's no mitzvah. And that's the way the Rashba in Brachas Yud Gimel Amud Beis, and he says it very clearly. If you're not mechavin for kabbalas or malchus shamayim, it's not the ma'aseh mitzvah. So this is important on a daily basis. Mr. Bura says, if you're not mechavin kavana salei v'pol pasuk rishon, Kaddish yekabel all malchus shamayim, you're not doing the ma'aseh mitzvah. So one aspect is kavana l'shem mitzvah. That's important. But regarding the first pasuk, what's ma'akiv is to know what you're saying. And Takov Mr. Bura says this in the end of Siman Samach, in Samach Beis Gimel, and Samach Gimel Tezvav, that basically kabbalas oil malchus shamayim is not a plus, it is the cheftza of the mitzvah of Krishma. In fact, there's a lot of Rabbi Kiva Eiga in the Mechtavim Siman Dal. I saw this quote in Alicha Shleima. He quotes the Lashon Amud Peivav, that Rabbi Kiva Eiga even suggests that if someone for some reason didn't have kavana pirush shamilas of Shema Yisrael, but he had kavana kabbalas malchus shamayim, he would be yotzei. That's how much kabbalas oil is part of the guf mitzvah, and that's why it's important that as we'll soon see the meaning of the words, because besides kavana for the mitzvah, there has to be oil malchus shamayim. Now the chinuch kedarkei b'kodesh gives a little flavor to the mitzvah, and in Tav Chaf he says the Baruch wanted to mizaka us. He did us a chesed. And that is, he gave us twice daily a mitzvah kabbalas oil. Because as the chinuch explains, a person is basically a gashmi. We have base instincts. And we're in a world that has so much heavily olam hazeh. So, and he says again, that when we connect to Emunah, when we connect to Kabbalah Malchus Shemayim, we'll be much better Yidden. Because as he explains, a person would live with the akara, that there's an ashgacha tmidus, the person sees, there's every machshava, dibra, and ma'isa, he'll live differently. Today we don't need much of a mashal. You look in almost all public places, a little something in the corner of the room. You don't know what that is, but I'll tell you what it is. That's a surveillance camera. That's the little eye that is actually recording everything. Every action, every deed, every mice in the room. And if you have a khalil, there's a problem of a geneva, you just take out the recording and you see exactly what happened. Nothing is forgotten. Imagine a yid lives his life that there's a little eye watching him. That's called Bari Olam. That's called Hay V'Yiyah. That's called Adayin HaKol. So the chinuch makes it very dramatic that Krishma is supposed to be a person mechazik that amunah. Imagine a person lives with the pasuk in the end of Kehelas, Soiv Davar Kol Nishma, as the Kimireva, as Mitzvah of Shemar, and as the Targum explains, a person that lives with the akara, that every action of his is on a screen, is being recorded, he will live Alikim Yarev as Mitzvah of Shemar. So that's why Kabbalah's oil Malchus Shema is so important. People say, I wish I had a reminder. I always forget what Shema is all about. So I'll tell you two built-in reminders. The Siddur Shla Kaddish says that Shema, if you read it in the opposite order, is Rosh Tevis Oil Malchus Shemayim. So the word Shema already is a wake-up call. Then you have in the Siddur, as it is in the Torah also, there's a big ayin and a big dalid. Zokta Vudraham and Dine Krishma. It's to remember that you're an aid. You're saying aidis on the Bnei Shloim's Yechidius. So, whether you need a reminder or not, but it's there. And basically, Krishma is a lot more than lip service. Today, I guess the catchword is vaccine. The person has to be vaccinated. Well, twice a day, we take a very safe, a very productive, very helpful vaccination. And that's our Krishma. And basically, that's really what it's all about. And I once made a list of halachos, the lamaisa, that are very much pointing to this direction, that Krishma is not just words, it's thinking about what is supposed to affect us. I'll give you a few mishalim. A person, let's say, is running late, or is running late to shul, or both, he woke up late. Bekitza, Zman Krishma is at a moment where he has to hurry up. So he has to get to shul, and he has to hurry. And he said, I'll say Krishma going to shul. So, this is a Mechab and Shulchan Aruch based on a Gemara. In Siman Samar Gimel, Siv Gimel, the Mechab says that basically you're allowed to say Krishma walking. But as Mr. Bura says, the first pasuk, don't be walking. Stop. Start Krishma, and then you can start walking. The Mr. Bura in Sivkot Yud Aleph adds, Baruch Shem is part of Krishma. In other words, the person has to say Krishma as he's going to shul. Okay, no. Make sure you have kavana. But Shema and Baruch Shem, you have to be stationary. Why? Because that's the Ikka Krishma. Another halacha, which is a minhag Yisrael based on a kol by Siman Yud, based on a medrash, that we all say Krishma, Shema Yisrael together loudly. Actually, the minhag is based on the Shulchan Aruch, that the Chazan says it loud first, and everybody follows. Actually, the real minhag, which many people do, there's a little of a pause after Vayich Ma'isor B'Hava, and people have a second or two to reflect and to have kavana, and then the Chazan starts Shema Yisrael, and the Olam joins in unison. This is based on the Kol Boy, the Medrash, that he didn't say together Krias Shema, because that's Ma'ira Kavana. You do something b'tzibur. Also, this is also halacha in Samach Aleph Siv Dalid, Minhag and Likreis Pasuk Rishain, B'Koil Ram. Even if you say the rest of Krishma quietly, but pasuk first part has to be Kol Ram. Why? Because as we know, Koil Ma'ira Kavana. Koil brings out the best of a person. In fact, the Goyen sends us to Shabbos Kuf Yotes. We're there. The Gemara says if you say Yesh Rabbi B'Chol Koichai is a gevaldig schos of Koiling Zardinai. What's Kol Koichai? So Rashi says Chol Kavanasai. So the Goyen is learning, it's M'haynu Hach. Koichai brings out Kavanasai. So here also, saying Krishma, the pasuk out loud, brings out the best of our kavana. Another halacha, what position should a person be when he says Krishma? And does she stand? Should he sit? Is there a maila? So one thing we know, we do not paskin like Beis Shammai, that in the morning he's supposed to be standing and at night sitting. Because B'shachva Chumecha is not the position of the way you say it, like Beis Shammai holds, but rather the zman of Krishma, in the morning and at night. That's why the Shulchan Aruch says you're not supposed to be machma like Beis Shammai. Now if you're standing the whole Shachris, fine, you're allowed to stand. But don't be sitting Birchas Krishma and stand up for Shachris Krishma, because that's following Beis Shammai and there's a terrible einish for that. So basically, say Krishma either sitting or standing. The question is there any preference? Is it more preferable standing versus sitting? So this is a tricky question. It's not on Shulchan Aruch, believe it or not. But what it is mefurish in the Medrash in Parshas Emor, Chav Zayin Vav. Medrash is a mashal. A king sent a letter to one of his countries. So what do the people do? They stand up with great pachad, and they take off their hats, and they read it, but the Kaddish Baruch Hu, even though I sent my letter, my Krishma to Yidden, you don't have to take off your hat, okay, you're supposed to wear a hat for Krishma, and also, you don't have to stand. To stand. Sounds like that standing, of course, is more covered. I'm not machayiv you to stand. It might indicate, but standing is better, more respectful. No. Let's learn a different medrash, and that's Vayikra Mem Chezayin. I'm sorry, in Vayera, parsha Vayera, in Bereshit Vayera Mem Chezayin, Vu Yosef Pesach Ha'oil Kechayim Hayoim. Avram was sitting, and the Baruch was standing. So, of course, Avram wanted to stand up for Kvod HaShechina. So the Baruch said, no. Let this be a siman lebanecha, that Shechina oimedes and banecha yoishvim, when they say Krishma, heim yoishvim lechvoidi vayni al gabon shenema alikim nitzav badas kel. So this medrash seems to be saying that you're supposed to sit, or that's the way it's done. Now, Lamaisa, there's no doubt about it. I want to be clear. It's more kavodik to stand. Whenever there's a mitzvah of kavod, we stand. That's why many mitzvahs, we stand. But kavana, most people find when I'm sitting, I have more kavana. I guess the word miyushiv has two meanings. Physically sitting, and I'm more, comfortable. Comfortable is the wrong word. I'm more settled. Now, here's what I think is true. If I were to ask you, tell me a pasuk in the Torah that we see that when you're talking about kavana, sitting is better than standing. So I know there's such a pasuk. Because the Gemara says in Brachos and Alpha Beis that benching, because it's the only mitzvah deraisa, except for Birchas HaTorah, but benching is zichat deraisa, you're supposed to say benching, sitting. Zok Tosfos, why? Lefisha Birchas HaMazon deraisa, hechmir ba liyos yoishiv mevarech. Because it's deraisa, you have to do it the best way possible, and that's sitting. In fact, Tosfos has a remez, v'huna treikin, v'yachalta v'savata uverachta. Savata is a conjunction of two words, shev eis. You eat, sit down, and bench. Tosfos has such a remez that benching should be said while sitting. So from this Tosfos we see clearly that when you're looking to maximize kavana, sitting is the preferable way of doing it. Oy bazoy, and that's what the Taz writes of the Rapashit in Siman Samach Gimel Sivkot and Beis, b'yeshiva yesh tvei kavana, and therefore you sit. Now the truth is we should stand because it's kavod al malchus shemayim. But the Medrash says twice the Baruch does not require us. So there's no chiyuv to show kavod, that type of kavod. There's a chiyuv to say kavana, and therefore sit. However, Rabbeinu Yoina, in Brachos Lamed Ches, on that sugya, the Rabbeinu Yoina wonders, we mechuyev to stand for benching, sit for benching, but there's no chiyuv to sit for krishma. Rabbeinu Yoina seems to assume there's no chiyuv to sit. Both the rices, Takeret krishma is kobal al malchus shemayim. So to Rabbeinu Yoina, that since benching is pretty long, 3 brachas min ha-Torah, you have to have kavana, you have to sit. Krishma is one pasuk, okay, so you could stand and have kavana. Probably Rabbeinu Yoina felt you have the mile of standing and you're not going to lose kavana, so stand. He doesn't say you have to stand, but there's no chiyuv to sit. But Lamaisa, I found a number of parsha, the Prisha, Darkei Moshe, Mekar Chaim, all this in Siman Samach Gimel, the Lavush, Pri Chodesh, Kaf HaChaim, Maimon Mordechai, all seem to indicate that indeed it's preferable to sit because sitting has more kavana. In other words, even though only the first pasuk is deraisa, but the rest of Krishma is Krishma. Now the emphasis, some people stand, especially talking this Makom Kaddish that we give the share in stone, stand for the entire Shachris. So once you're standing, if you're allowed to continue standing. The Chassam Sofer's minhag was to stand for Krishma, and his reason that was given that the Enichos gave is because he saw this as a god as Eidus, like we said, Eid, and Eidus has to be B'amida. So as you see, we can't say halacha either way. I think the best way to do it is where a person finds maximum kavana. Some people find when they're standing, some people when they're sitting. But there's no chiyuv to stand. That's clearly we see from the Medrashim. Another halacha is the minhag of Shulchan Aruch Siman Samach Aleph Sif Hey Nehagen Litan Yodeyim Al Pneiim B'Kriyas Pasuk Rishon. You put your hands on your eyes. Again, the Shulchan Aruch lashon is Yodeyim, as with both hands. Now, it's not really a raya because Yodeyim Al Pneiim, maybe it's talking to Klal Yisrael. But I'm concerned about lashon of the Gemara, Yadav Al Panav. I don't know if it meant literally, but our minhag, as we'll soon see, is that we put one hand, the right hand, as we'll soon see. But the source of this machaba, to cover your hand, put your hands on your eyes, is brachas Yud Gimel, that Rabbeinu HaKadosh covered his eyes when he said Krishma. Now the Kli Yakar in Parshas Balak Chav Dalad Dalad has an incredible yotzei to explain this. He's not talking about Krishma, but he's saying B'derech Klal, a person has two senses that really are the very person. And that's the eyes, what he sees, and his heart. And so basically a person's attention is divided between his eyes and his heart. But Zakte Kli Yakar, a Sagi Nohar who can't see, he's called a Sagi Nohar because he's Kulei Lev. His heart is working doubly because he has no eyes to see. In other words, a person has to divide his energies, his eyes and his heart. But a Sagi Nohar has full hearts, full devotion because he doesn't see. B'chein, and his lashon is Arias halavavis v'stam riyas einayim makrishin zeh. One weakens the other because if you have a certain amount of electricity and you're putting it into two outlets, so both are going to be shvach. But when you're channeling all to one, it's full power. Zakti Kli Yakar. That's why the minhag is to close your eyes by Krishma, because you're re-channeling. You are basically putting all your kaiches into the leiv, into kavana, which to us, of course, is really the yotzei of it all. And this is the real svara of closing your eyes to block everything else out. Of course, I saw David Padre says a beautiful insight that the ik of Krishma is Amunah, and Amunah is most felt and most needed when we don't see what's going on. We don't see a cheshbon. We see a dark world. So you close your eyes, Shema Yisrael, and Yidden in the most darkest moment, in the worst sorrows, said Shema Yisrael with great simcha, because that's what Shema Yisrael is. Even if it's totally darkness, we see the licht of Kaddish Baruch Hu. But Eich Sheyiyah, there's no doubt about it, the minhag is based on a Gemara to close your eyes. Which hand? So it says that the right hand, and even a lefty who typically does mitzvah with his left hand, here it's not totally in koyach, it's totally in the right being the chesed, and basically we always use the right hand. Interesting enough, the Gemara seems to hold you use both hands, but that minhag, at least I haven't found it in Sifrei Halacha. Now, someone asked, you have to close your eyes and cover it, or just cover your eyes. So it doesn't say anything. The ik is not to see, so probably it's enough, even if you don't have to close your eyes, as long as you cover your eyes. The main thing is to divert your attention from your eyes to your heart. Someone asked, do you have to is it enough to close your eyes, or do you have to actually cover with your hands? So the Gemara says he covered with his hands, and al pisoid, I saw the Mekar Chaim said that in Indian to use your hand. So you follow the Gemara, take your hand and put it over your eyes. The interesting question is, if I wear glasses, do I have to take off my glasses? So it's not a din of touching your eyes, it's chatzitza. No. This is basically to maximize your focus. People that wear glasses, I've noticed, They take off the glasses, they put it down, then they can't find it, and they have to look for it. So you're distracting yourself by taking off your glasses. So there's no din of chatzitza, so you keep the glasses on, put your hands on your glasses. A dik is to block out the world. Another interesting halacha we see, we don't do halacha because of a concern of kavana. The Mechaba in Samach Aleph Siv Chav Dalid says they both say Krias Shema with the trop. And that's the minhag of Svardim Ad Hayom. It's a beautiful experience. The Svardim say together Krias Shema from beginning to the end with the trop, the entire tzibur. Because trop is very much part of the Torah. But what's noteworthy, maybe it's fascinating is the right word, whenever we speak about the Chazal speak about the word Krias Shema, you always use the lashon of Krias Shema, Korin Shema, Amos Korin. L'chayr say Oimim Krias Shema, like Zmiras Yaimeru and Oimim Krias Shema. Whenever we say the word Krias Shema, it's always Krias Korin. Zot the Michtam of Dava Padran is Chuvis because Krias Shema essentially is with trop, Krias HaTorah and Krias Shema. That's right. The mitzvah of Krias Shema is part of it is trop. Now. And that's why Lamaisa, the minhag of the Mechaba, and Svardim Ad Hayom is Krias Shema with trop. But here we see something unique. The Darkei Moshe in Sifkat and Ches, he says, Lamaisa, we find it distracting. Kriya b'tameh mafsid kavana. So what are you going to do? You can say Krias Shema with the trop and not have kavana. In other words, we have to have a sense of priorities. If we use trop, we're not going to maximize kavana. And the Ramah Taka in Shulchan Aruch says this, the minhag is not to say with trop, unless you could do it. And Taka, the Rabbi say, most Marabayim said Krias Shema without trop, but it's not because trop is unimportant, but more important is kavana. So basically the focus is oil malchus shamayim and make sure that is achieved. Another halacha, also interesting, it's halacha in Shulchan Aruch, that based on Rishonim, which really come out of Gemara, that Samach Aleph Sivav, to move one's head in various directions when you say the pasuk Shema Yisrael, there's different minhag on which direction to go. But basically, there's a minhag to move your head in the directions of Kabbalah or Malchus Shamayim. Why is it not done by many people? So Dr. Chashochan in Siv Gimel, L'misha zeu bilbo hamachshava lo yasakein. Again, the objective is complete kavanas, kabbalas, oil malchus. If moving your head, you're going to focus on which side to go, and some of the person is thinking how he looks so holy, he feels so holy, it's distracting. You're missing the point. So look how much halachos are based on maintaining full kavana. But to me, what was the biggest chiddush, we give up mitzvahs, literally mitzvahs daraisa, because of kavana. We know, and this is a whole simon in Shulchan Aruch, that when are you allowed to answer Dvarim Kedusha during davening? So there are different levels, Pesukot Zimra, Bechas Krishma, Shemayin Esra. But one thing, Kedusha or Kaddish, both are the rises of an Ekdash B'Sach B'nai Yisrael. You're allowed to answer almost any time, except for, of course, during Shemayin Esra. Then you listen, yotzei Ka'ina. But to give up a Yesh Me'Rabba or Kedusha, even during Bechas Krishma, even during Krishma, except the first parsha. Mechab ben Samach Vav Sif Aleph says, but pasuk Shema Yisrael u'Baruch Shem, you can't answer even Dvarim Kedusha of Kaddish and Kedusha. Why? And Taka the Mechaba and Magaram quotes this, that even the Mishnah quotes this, even Baruch Shem. Why? So if you look at the Beis Yosef, he's quoting the Rosh, which is the Makar of this halacha, Ein davar gadol kabos al malchus shamayim. Avad the Kedusha is important, but not now. You can't say Yesh Me'Rabba if you're middle of Krishma. So you give up a deraisa because you might be confused. And this is also, I should mention, if a person is in the middle of Krishma and his Rebbe walks in, so he stands up. That's part of Kamal Zal, to do mitzvahs. If an ani comes to you in the middle of the second part of Krishma, you give him. That's part of being a yid, giving tzedakah. But during the first pasuk, and some say the first parsha, then you don't send that for a gadol, and you don't give tzedakah. Because now we are focusing on Kabbalah's oil, And ein davar gadol kekabolas oil malchus shemayim. This I didn't see in the earlier poskim. So Rav Sternbuch and Aleph Samach Aleph, the Beis Baruch of Aleph Chav Zayin say this, that during the first part of Krishma, no tzedakah is given and no standing up for a gadol. Of course, mitzvah chashiv, but now the full focus is on the Kabbalah's oil. The Torah puts it very nicely when he says, "V'chol ma sheyasa adam la'oira kavana toivu." Again, because ein davar gadol k'Kabbalah's oil malchus shemayim. Now, the second part of today's shir is the meaning of the Krishma. So the Rashba in the Chelekei Siman Orei puts it very well. He says any bardas knows that Krishma, the yichud of Amunah, is remezes soidas v'ikim gedolim. That's something that their kavanas, the way Shulchan writes it, kavanas noiroyis. But on a simple level, we have to know what to have in mind. So basically, Shema typically means listen. But the Sepornu and the Rashba in that tshuva say it's much more than listening. The Sepornu says, his boinan v'haveinzeh. Listen and accept it, internalize it, use it. The Rashba says, hear it, think about it, and become it. Be a maimin. That's the word Shema, like in Yiddish, deher. The word Yisrael means a Yid. You're talking to another, you're talking to yourself, you're talking to others. But as we know, there's a different meaning. Because in Pesachim Nun Vav, Gemara tells a story when Yaakov was afraid that he didn't have mitasei shleima. So the Shvatim says, don't worry, Shema Yisrael, our father Yaakov Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, we're all with you. And of course, Yaakov responded very happily, Baruch Shem Kavod Machus Olam Voed. Rashi, and that Gemara says, Shema Yisrael, when the Shvatim said it, is going on Yisrael, Yaakov Aviyam. And that's why the Pashtis, one of the Pshatim in Yisrael, is Yaakov Avinu. And the Rambam in Hilchos Krishma, Aleph Dal, seems to learn like that. When we say twice a day, Shema Yisrael, besides talking to ourselves and others, we're referring to Yaakov Avinu. But the emes, again, the parsha pshat, that's more meaningful, we're talking to ourselves, and we want to really bake in this important emunah. Hashem Elokeinu is something we should know from every time we say the Shem Hashem. That's the Mechab and Simmons in Sif Hey. Hashem, there are two pshatim, because there are two ways of saying Hashem. There's Kriya and there's the Ksiv. The Ksiv is Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Kriya is Adnus. So the Adnus is Adayin HaKol. The Ksiv is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Hay Hay V'Yeh. So there are two pshatim or two meanings in Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Goyen basically says that whenever you say a bracha, it's enough to have the meaning, the simple meaning, the Kri. Hashem is Adoin HaKol, Adnus. Elokim, Elokeinu, Mechaber says in Shulchan Aruch, is Takov, Bal Yecholes, U Bal HaKoyches Kulam. That's something that's hard to teach in English, but it means has the unlimited ability to run this world, to design this world, and continue the upkeep of the world. What's interesting is that the Goyen, who's Mekel and says it's enough to have one pshat in Hashem, he says, but Krishma, this is all in Bir Gra and Siman Hey, Sif Kat and Dalit, when it comes to Krishma, you have to have both pshatim. And the way the Goyen says it is for us music to our ears. Because Krishma is all about Kabbalah Malchus Shemayim. So now you have to have both pshatim. So basically when we say, and it's not hard to do, it's very, once you get used to it, Hashem has two meanings, Hay Hay V'Yeh, Adoin HaKol, Elokeinu is Takov, Bal HaKoyches, Bal HaKoyches Kulam. Elokeinu is an interesting word, because typically we would say Elokim. But the Goyen in Aderes Eliyahu in the beginning of Devarim points out that there's an added dimension here. Elokim means the Rebbeinu Shalom. Elokeinu means my Rebbeinu Shalom. And the Goyen says, Elokeinu shemashgiach aleinu bepratos. What I'm doing is I'm saying it's my Rebbeinu Shalom. Vukeli v'chai goyali. It's my Rebbeinu Shalom. It's moed ani lefanecha. It's me and the Rebbeinu Shalom. Oh, that makes Kabbalah's oil very real. Hashem Echad has two meanings. Rashi and Vaschanan teach it in a simple way. Even though today we don't see the full glory of Malchus Shemayim because we live in a world that's so dark and so full of tumah. But our hope is Hashem Elokeinu, who now is only Nebuch, our Rabbi Shalom. Hopefully, because of Hashem Echad, it will be all over the world. Hashem Echad u'Shmo Echad. That's what Rashi quotes the pasuk. However, the more simple meaning is this emphasizes our Kabbalah's oil. We'll soon see the Mechaber has a. What does the word Echad mean? One, the Rashi says one. Zayin Rekia, one world. Arba Kanfei, all four different directions of the world. Arba Kanfei Sa'aretz. The simple word Echad is packed with meaning. So when we say Hashem Echad, we are really highlighting and accentuating the depth of our Kabbalah soil. Hashem Echad is one Yibon Shalom, Zayin, Rekiyas, and Arba Kanfei Za'aretz, and the four parts of the world, and plus, more and more. So basically, that's what we're saying, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, with the full implications of Kabbalah's oil Malchus Shemayim. And in Samach Aleph, Siv Vav, Mechaber Taka says this, the Gag of the Ches, the Dalid, all have special meaning. But what's interesting is the Ramah in Samach Aleph Yud Dalid says you're supposed to say the Krishma the following way: Shema Yisrael, pause, Hashem Elokeinu, pause, and then say Hashem Echad. So it's interesting. If you really want to mekabel ol Malchus Shemayim, we better to say it in one neshima. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That's our hope. That's our depth of the Kol Malchus Shemayim. So I saw Dava Nifl in Halichas Shloim in Perik Zayin, Ha'orah 14. Zalman received a kuncha someone wrote that explained this Ramah, why you have to pause after Elokeinu. And he wrote back a beautiful letter thanking him for enlightening him how to say Krishma. From Zalman's Anivas, he felt he learned something spectacular. Because this person it's really based on the actual, what the Rameh Ivra, who was the Ramah's quoting. And he says there a very practical insight. Hashem, Shema Yisrael, Hashem, who's Elokeinu, at that point we have to pause to be Makabel Ol Malchus Shemayim. Like I told you, that's the Kabbalah's all. So you can't run with the next part. So you have to do it in piecemeal. Hashem, who's Elokeinu, Makabel Ol Malchus Shemayim. Now, my hope is either Hashem Echad, I'll have the Kabbalah's all in all its oimik, Hashem Echad, Zayin Rekiyas, and Arba Kanfais, or like Rashi says, it's going to be in the entire world. But first things first. First you Mekabel Ol Malchus Shemayim, Elokeinu, me, and then you go weiter with Hashem Echad. Now, Lamaisa, I saw this in parsha mitzvah Lafarsim. People find it very difficult. How do I pack so much into the word Echad? You don't have to. In Orchos Rabbeinu in Aleph Nun Gimel, the Stipler said, he said the word, and then he had kavana. Kavana doesn't have to be b'shas you say it, otherwise the person finds it a great difficulty. B'chlal, I want to tell you, the Chazinish in L'Shichnei Siddushu, it's Aleph Amud Ayin Dal, the Shevet Levi, Yud Tezayin, the Shevet Kasi, Gimel Nun Hey, all say that kavana does not have to be as you say it, because it's very trying. As long as you didn't start the next words, you could have kavana then. So again, when a person gets used to saying it, some people, unfortunately find it an ordeal, traumatic. How do I do it? Then you got the wrong number. I always say the Medrash says La Yitrachti Aleich. And Mershim gave us Krishma with the same ni'imas like every other mitzvah, with the same dachinoya. Krishma is not an ordeal. It's not a struggle. You do it right. Hashem Shu Elokeinu. Pause. Hashem Echad. Either pshat is good, and then you can have the kavana, Zayin Rekiyas, and all that after the Echad is said. The real challenge is Baruch Shem, because Baruch Shem is not a pasuk. You can't look up the first Rishonim. But we know Baruch Shem was first said by Yaakov Avinu. We said that in Pesachim. We also find the famous Medrash in Veschan and Beis Lamed Vav when the Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim and he heard this magnificent praise. The Malachim said Baruch Shem, and he pretty much stole it. And in fact, we were so much concerned about it, that he stole, that we never say it loud, except on Yom Kippur, when we like Malachim. So we have very prominent sources of Baruch Shem, and of course the third source, which it's in Saita, Mem, Amid Beis, and other places, in the Avodas Beis HaMikdash, the high point, they said Baruch Shem. So we have three sources of Baruch Shem. But what's noteworthy, the Rambam, very uncharacteristic in Hilchas Krishma, Aleph Dalid, the Rambam brings the whole story of Yaakov and his sons. So Rabbi Zalman Meltzer asked, the Rambam doesn't say reasons for mitzvahs in the Yad, maybe in the Sefer Mitzvah, but not in the Yad. And also he doesn't say stories. So Rabbi Zalman, and I saw Rabbi Sternbuch and Chayla Gimel, Simon Chavav develops it more, that the Rambam holds this is part of Kabbalah's all. It's not a story, and it's not just Gezok. The way to emphasize the Kabbalah's oil is Shema Yisrael, part 1, and part 2 is Baruch Shem. And the emphasis, the Mishtabura, in three different places, Samach Gimel Yud Beis, when it says supposed to have kavana and Shema, he says, Hu Adin Baruch Shem. In Samach Vav Yud Aleph, that you don't answer Dvarim Kedusha during Shema, Hu Adin Baruch Shem. And in Samach Aleph, Lamed Aleph, you say Shema and Baruch Shem, and then you pause, and then start for your hafta. Why? Because Shema and Baruch Shem is one package. And the emphasis, the Magen Avram, quoting a Lavush, Magen Avram Samach Aleph, Yud Aleph, and the El Yerabba, the Rav, Kavachayim, all say, a person said Baruch Shem without kavana, he's not yotzei even b'diavad. Now, Grada, the Bialocha in Samach Aleph, Yud Gimel, and the Bejana Rav, the Astayra, the Aruch HaShulchan, and Vav, Moshe, and Hey, so Mezalman and Lichashlema all are mekel b'diavad if you didn't have kavana with Baruch Shem, but all agree it's an integral part of Shema Yisrael. In fact, if someone said Baruch Shem without kavana, he didn't go weiter, then go back and say Baruch Shem. All agree it's mamish part of Shema. The question is, b'diavad, do you have to say Krishma over? Like many paiskim, yes, and there's some that are mekel. And that's why a person has to really be focused on the Baruch Shem. And especially that's the integral part of the Kabbalah's oil. Now, what's the pshat in those words? I wish it was as easy as it sounds. But the simple taich is Baruch Shem, gebenched, blessed, hopefully brecha, it's not the parsha pshat, either Baruch, gebenched, or blessed, or brecha, but let's assume it's simply blessed, is the name of his glorious malchus forever. Now, what we're saying with that is that we're praising Hashem, our praise, that the Baruch Shem's kavod should be forever, which is very similar to Yehei Shmei Rabbah La'ol Mamei Maya, and Taka the Targum Yerushalmi on Shema Yisrael connects the two. But there's another way to learn, just as simple. Baruch, pause, Shem Kavod Machusid Olam Va'ed. I'm benching, whatever, blessing, the name whose glorious kingdom is forever. And the Yisrael points out, that's where he understood it, that the Olam Va'ed is going on Malchus Shamayim. The Bnei Hashem's Malchus is forever. So I'm praising the name of the Bnei Hashem whose Malchus is forever. It's very different. One is going on the praise and one's going on the Malchus. And then there's a third pshat, and that's Shlomo Zalman's pshat and Alichai Zayin Vav based on a Malbim in Nehemiah, where there we find Vivarchu Shem Kvodecha, that basically we see a tiny fraction of Kvod Malchus Shemayim, especially in this dark world that we live in. But we know there's so much more of Malchus Shemayim. So we're saying Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusai, that in other words we're saying we praise Hashem, or we hope that this Malchus Shemayim, that we see so little of it, but it will be in this gala more Kvod Malchusai L'Olam Va'ed, because there's so much that we don't see. Now, this is a tipa shabiyam of what there is, the Nefesh HaChaim and Gimel Vav. I saw that Rav Sternbuch has, in the first, second, and third volume, he has tshuvas about this. But what do we do on a practical, simple level? So I want to say what I think is emes. The aside of all of Krishma is Kabbalah's oil. We saw from Rabbi Kiva Eiger, even Pirush HaMilas is not as important as Kabbalah's oil. So a person should look into the sugya when he has time. Again, there's other tshuvas also. But whatever touches him most, whether L'Olam Va'ed is going on Malchus Shemayim, or going on praise, or you're going on what's missing, but at the end of the day, there has to be a Kabbalah's oil. Now, the exact meaning, no one could be machriya. Probably they're all true. It's not a stira. But a person, amol tfasta meruba like tefasta. The Likutim Arich says, sometimes a person is busy with all his kavanis, and he forgets to have Kabbalah's oil. Like Salam said, he thinks about the whole world but himself. So pick the meaning that's most pashit, that's most appealing to you, and have that in mind. A little bit about the rest of Krias Shema. Of course, the next parsha, I should say, is v'yohavta. V'yohavta is past tense. You loved Hashem in the past, which is wrong. We have to love Hashem in the future. The Chai Adam in Chaf Aleph Yud Gimel points out that before you say v'yohavta, you should have a zin to mekayim the mitzvah of Havas Hashem. That's one of the Taryag mitzvahs. And it's interesting, both the Rambam, Sefer Mitzvahs Gimel, and the Chinuch and Taf Yud Ches, they describe the mitzvah of Avas Yisrael, of Avas Hashem, that a person has to think about mitzvahs and their Baruch Shalom, and the lashon of the Chinuch is exceptional. He should have a tachlus hatainug in Avas Hashem. In other words, Yidden, we are into taivas. We're very proud of that, but we don't accept cheap imitations. We have a very discriminating taste. We want tachlis hatainik. We want the purest, real pleasure. And that is Avas Hashem. So when we say v'yahavtas Hashem Elokecha, we are asking to have a tachlis hatainik, the ultimate pleasure in Avas Hashem. Of course, the second parsha is Kabbalah's all mitzvahs, which is basically understood, but I want to focus about the third parsha, which has a lot of mitzvahs in it, and we have to realize. First of all, we look at the Mechaber says in Chav Daled, we look at the tzitzis when we say them, because really that's a key mitzvah of Re'isam Oisai Uzchartem. Both the Smak and the Charedim point out that this is a Deraisa Re'isam Oisai. In fact, it's noteworthy in yotzei and Gimel, the Mechaber, the Ramah says, when is it cut in Chayiv and tzitzis? When he can hold the tzitzis. So Moshe in Chelik Hey, Chelik Aleph, Simon Gimel wonders, why is that important, the tzitzis, holding the tzitzis? So Moshe says, since there's the mitzvah, the Raisa, to look at the tzitzis, if a cotton can't do it, he's not ready for the mitzvah. So Moshe is saying that looking at the tzitzis is part of the mitzvah of Krishma and tzitzis. In fact, some people put it over their eyes. The Mechaber says that when you get to a certain point, you kiss the tzitzis. Okay, the guy didn't kiss it, but whether you kiss it or not, one thing for sure, we hold it during Krishma. There's different minhagim. Some people hold it all four. Some people hold only two of the tzitzis. The minhag apiari is to hold it bein zeras, the kmitza. That's the whole Krishma. When you come to the last parsha, pick up and hold it in your right hand. Dafka, we hold it. Initially, we hold it in our left hand, bein zeras, the kmitza. But one thing is clear, that it's an opportunity of re'isa ma'is yuschartim. The very end of Krishma is another deraisa. And that's the mitzvah of Zechiriyas Mitzrayim. And many Siddurim, Baruch Hashem, they put in, that when we say the words, Asher tzeisi eschem eretz Mitzrayim, have in mind this mitzvah. The Chai Adam says in Chaf Aleph Aleph, Parsha Sitza is a deraisa because of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So look how many mitzvahs you have in the last parsha. But Achrein Chava, which is in a certain sense, I guess that's the sikum of today, the first parsha we didn't yet see, and that's Kel Melech Naaman. Now the truth is, Kel Melech Naaman is in the wrong place in the wrong time. Because between Aboicher and Shema, we don't even see Amen in most places. Rather, this shul does, but many places don't see Amen. And here we put in Kel Melech Naaman, and that's why the emissaries, they are Gedolei Rishonim and Poisim, they hold you don't say Kel Melech Naaman. The Mechaber makes no mention of it, and in Sfar Siddurim, there's no Kel Melech Naaman. Where is it coming from? So there's an incredible medrash in Tanchum Kedoshim Vav, where it starts with the following: they take Krishma Kal B'necha. Don't minimize Krishma. Why? And he makes a cheshbon. There are 248 words in Krishma. There are 248 ivarim in a person's body, and each word activates that particular avar. The implication is, if you don't say every word, so you're not complete. Now, if you count up Krishma, there's only 245 words. So some have the minhag, and that's the minhag that the Shulchan Aruch brings. Listen to the Shatzei Hashem Elokeichem Emes, add that, and then you have a complete Krishma and a complete body. In fact, I once heard a taich, V'atem adveikim, if you add Hashem Elokeichem to the Krishma, Chayim Kulchem Hayoim, you'll live fully, otherwise you're missing. Now, but let's say you're davening b'yechidus, you don't have the shots. So the Shulchan Aruch says, no problem. Tes vav vavin, the emes v'yatz v'nocha, and he has a cheshbon, it adds up to be as good as 3 words. Mechaber does not mention Kel Melech Naaman because he holds this wrong. It's a hefsik. The Ramah does mention that because if you have no other eitzah, that's the eitzah. So whatever minhag you do is fine, but one thing I want to mention, and that's the beauty of this sugya, look how not only every Krishma counts, like we said, but every word of Krishma counts. All agree you have to have 248 words. So every word counts, and we say it with kavana. Hopefully we'll be zaycha to the brachas that Krishma has. I couldn't talk to you all.
Shem Yegenshirt, I'd like to be a Zechariah Smith today's shir. As Shem after minhag, Rav Smith says pesukim of the shir. And Anji ben Akasha Rotzak Kaddish Baruch Hu Zakes es Israel lefikir hebel am mitzvah shenema ala neu chofes am sidka yagdol terviyale.